Hi, I'm Delphine. And my parents didn't just disown me. They evicted me with a note taped to the fridge. After a 12-hour night shift, after fixing the roof at 4 a.m. in the rain, I came home to trash bags stuffed with my clothes and a message. You're dead weight. Get out. No warning, no conversation. They replaced me with my brother, erased me from photos, drained our accounts, forged my name to steal the house my grandmother left me. Now, I'm fighting for something they never wanted me to have. Not the house. The truth. But how do you prove a family meant to erase you? Never really saw you at all? It was just past 4 a.m. when I pulled into the gravel lot behind the logistics center, the same way I had every night for the past 4 years. The light drizzle had turned into a soft, constant rain. My boots were soaked from walking through the loading dock earlier, and my shoulders ached from lifting crates no one else wanted to touch. Scranton nights in April weren't forgiving, especially not when the chill soaked through the seams of your jacket and clung to your bones. I rubbed the back of my neck and muttered, 1 hour, just one solid hour of sleep. My phone buzzed as I slumped behind the wheel of my truck. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. Leak in the roof again, dripping over the stove. You need to come. No, please. No, hope you're okay. Just another task. I stared at the message for a second, blinked hard, then pulled the truck into gear. My hands gripped the wheel tighter than they needed to. I didn't even question it. I just drove. That's what you do when you're the one left to keep everything together. When you're the one no one says thank you to, but everyone expects to show up. The rain picked up as I parked outside the house. Our house. My house, technically. Though you wouldn't know it by how they treated me. The porch light was off. The entire place was dark, save for a dim glow from the kitchen window. I grabbed the ladder from the side shed and climbed onto the roof with a flashlight clenched between my teeth. The wind was sharp and mean. The shingles near the stove vent had shifted again, just like last spring. I used duct tape and tar to patch what I could, my fingers stiff and numb. My palms scraped against the rough edges, splitting open in thin red lines. The rainwater mixed with the blood. I didn't even flinch. At this point, pain just felt like part of the uniform. By the time I climbed down, it was nearly 5. My hair clung to my face, plastered by rain and sweat. I stepped through the back door and into the kitchen. The faucet dripped in rhythm, tick, tick, tick. Mom sat at the table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. I fixed it, I said, peeling off my wet jacket. But you should probably have someone check it properly when the weather clears. She didn't look up. Okay, that was it. No offer of tea, no towel, no gratitude. Just okay. I didn't even have it in me to argue. I mumbled something about needing rest and shuffled into the living room, too drained to bother going upstairs. My boots stayed on, my damp clothes stuck to the couch cushions as I collapsed into the closest thing I could find to comfort. I dozed off fast, dreaming of summers past, ones where Grandma still sang while she cooked, where Orenthal and I rode bikes down the hill by the park without thinking of who owed what to whom. In my dream, there was no debt between us, only air and laughter. When I opened my eyes again, the sunlight was already peeking through the curtains. I sat up slowly, body aching. The silence in the house felt wrong. Still. Too still. 3 black trash bags sat in the hallway. They weren't there when I'd closed my eyes. One of them had my favorite flannel poking out the top. My backpack leaned against the wall, unzipped and empty. I stood, heart thudding. My boots hit the floor harder than I meant. I walked into the kitchen. The note was taped to the fridge with a strip of electrical tape. You're dead weight. Get out. No name, no explanation, just that. My wallet lay open on the counter, cash gone. My ID still there, which felt like a twisted kindness. The fridge still hummed, oblivious. My knees buckled slightly, but I didn't fall. I pressed one hand to the counter, the other shaking as I picked up the note and turned it over. Blank. Like the space they'd cleared for me in their lows. No footsteps, no voices. Just the echo of silence where a family used to be. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. My heart screamed for this to be a prank, a moment of miscommunication. But deep down, I knew. They'd planned this. I whispered into the emptiness. Did you really mean this? My voice barely made a sound. I grabbed my keys off the hook by the door. My boots were still damp from earlier. I didn't change. There was nothing left to change into. I stepped out onto the porch. The bags were already outside, neatly stacked beside the steps. The same porch I'd repainted 2 summers ago. My truck was parked exactly where I left it, as if waiting to drive me out of a life I no longer belonged to. I walked to it slowly, opened the door, and slid behind the wheel. I turned once, glancing at the house. Then I knocked. Just once. No answer. No one peeked through the blinds. No door creaked open. Just rain, again. I got into the truck, closed the door, and stared ahead. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the ignition. I turned the key in the ignition, but I didn't know where to drive. I spent the night curled up in the front seat of my truck, parked at the edge of a 24-hour grocery store lot. The engine had gone cold hours ago, and so had the coffee I was nursing from a styrofoam cup I didn't remember buying. My lower back throbbed, and my knees ached in the cramped position I'd folded myself into, but I didn't move. I didn't want to feel awake. Awake meant remembering. A soft knock on the window startled me. A teenager, maybe 17, stood outside holding a grocery bag, her face scrunching with cautious concern. "You okay, ma'am? Do you need help?" I gave her a tight smile and waved her off, muttering something like, "I'm fine, just resting." She nodded and walked away, but I saw the look in her eyes. I wasn't a woman with a story. I was a cautionary tale. To her, I looked like someone who'd given up. I unlocked my phone, thumb hovering over Mom's contact. The thread was still there. The last message, her demand about the leaking roof. I tapped call. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. So I did the thing I told myself I wouldn't. I texted, "Mom, just want to talk, please." Almost immediately, the message bounced back. Number blocked. I didn't cry. I didn't have the bandwidth to. Instead, I opened the messaging app where we used to have the family group chat. The name still popped up, Home Team, but I wasn't in it anymore. For a few minutes, I just sat there, staring at the screen, wondering if I had imagined everything. Then I made the mistake of opening Facebook. There she was, Pamela, with her ever-so-composed smile, standing beside Orenthal in front of the backyard grill. The caption above the photo read, "Family means everything. So proud of my son for coming home." I zoomed in without realizing. My old bike, my 10-speed with the faded stickers from Girl Scout camp, was in the corner of the picture, painted navy blue. Orenthal's favorite color. They hadn't just tossed me out. They'd filled the space I used to occupy with someone they deemed more worthy. I was being overwritten, like I never fit into the story to begin with. The next blow came from someone who meant no harm. "Hey, Delphine," my coworker Joanna messaged. "Saw your folks had a cookout. Surprised you weren't there." There was a link. I shouldn't have clicked it, but I did. A wider shot this time. Mom, Dad, Orenthal, some neighbors I hadn't seen in years. Everyone holding plastic cups and laughing. My spot at the patio table was taken by a dog bed. The caption, "Rebuilding with those who matter." The phrase twisted in my chest like a rusted blade. The people I used to make meals for, clean up after, stay up late sewing buttons for. They'd gathered and toasted and celebrated. Without me. I found myself at a laundromat an hour later, standing in front of a washer with a load of clothes I didn't need to wash. Some old jeans, a t-shirt from college, and a flannel I barely wore. I dumped in detergent, inserted quarters, and just watched the drum spin. A girl nearby argued with her mother about something trivial. School clothes, maybe. The mom's voice was sharp but not cruel. The girl rolled her eyes and walked off, and the mother followed after her. I kept my gaze low, but I felt it rising. That bitter envy. Not at the fight, but at the fact that the mother had chased after her child. No one chased after me. I sat on the cracked orange bench, pulled out one of the shirts from the dryer, and started scrubbing at an invisible stain. Over and over, just to keep my hands moving. Maybe disappearing was easier for them than admitting they pushed me out. That thought didn't feel like anger. It felt like fact. Later, back in the truck, I looked again at the Facebook photo. Orenthal's smile was wide, confident, like someone who'd landed exactly where he thought he belonged. Mom stood beside him, her expression soft and proud. That particular tilt of her head, I hadn't seen directed at me since I couldn't remember when. I touched the screen gently, as if doing so could answer the question whispering through my mind. Was it always supposed to be him? I needed answers, even if I had to go back to where I wasn't wanted to get them. The coffee tasted bitter, even with the extra cream. I stirred it more out of habit than anything else, sitting in a booth near the back of a small cafe that offered free Wi-Fi and no questions. My phone sat on the table, screen cracked but functional, as I attempted to access the shared family cloud folder. The same one where we'd stored birthdays, holidays, and every mediocre casserole photo from the past 15 years. Access denied. I stared at the message for a beat, then tried again, slower this time. Same response. The email tied to my access was no longer valid. I took a deep breath, not because I needed air, but because I needed to not throw the phone. "You okay?" the barista asked as she passed by, a pitcher of refill coffee in hand. I looked up, managing a polite nod. She smiled gently. "Refills on the house. You look like you've seen ghosts." I gave her a tight thanks and turned my attention back to the phone. Ghosts would have been easier. Ghosts don't delete you from folders and group chats. I opened Facebook, hoping to find something, anything, that would make me feel like I hadn't imagined my life. My finger scrolled past a few local posts before I searched for a family album I'd created back when Mom first learned how to upload photos. It was gone. I checked another. Delphine's graduation 2012. Also gone. One more. Summer cabin trip. Still there. But I wasn't tagged. Every photo of me was still visible, but I had been untagged like I was someone passing through, not someone who had helped organize the trip, bought the snacks, driven the car. I clicked into the photo. There I was, smiling under a ridiculous straw hat, standing between Mom and Orenthal. My arm around her waist. Her hand was cut off in the crop. That old saying from the barista floated back into my mind. Something I'd heard before, but never felt so literally. They can delete pictures, not memories. Unless they delete you, too. I logged out and set the phone down. Later that day, after drifting through a few thrift stores looking for nothing in particular, I walked into a pharmacy to buy toothpaste. As I waited in line, I heard someone say my name. Delphine? It was my cousin Sierra, her hair in a high bun and sunglasses perched on her head indoors. We exchanged a short hug, the kind that doesn't warm anything. "I just saw that video from the family chat, Orenthal doing that terrible impression of Uncle Hank. I laughed so hard I choked on my cereal." I blinked. "What video?" She tilted her head. "You didn't see it? It was hilarious. It's been bouncing around the group chat all morning." I smiled, because that's what we do when we're not sure what else to do, and made a quick excuse to head to the restroom. Inside the stall, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. The family group chat wasn't listed. I checked the app again. I hadn't muted it. I had been removed, weeks ago. They hadn't even needed a dramatic exit, just a quiet deletion. Simple, clean. The worst part? It worked. I walked from the pharmacy straight to the church I hadn't set foot in since my grandmother's funeral. I didn't go inside. I couldn't. I sat on the concrete steps, staring at the familiar wood of the front door. The same door I had opened every Sunday as a child, holding Marcel's hand. The bells rang out the hour, echoing across the town like they always had. But they didn't sound like comfort anymore. As families passed by, smiling and holding hands, I sat there, completely invisible. I wasn't forgotten, I whispered to no one. I was chosen to be erased. The words felt heavier when spoken aloud. Somewhere inside me, a crack widened. Being ignored is worse than being hated. It means you're nothing. And I wasn't nothing, not to me. Not anymore. As the sun began to set, casting long golden shadows on the church sidewalk, I knew I was done asking for space in stories that no longer wanted to include me. That night, back at the truck, I opened a new cloud folder. I named it Delphine's Proof of Life. The first image I uploaded, a photo I had taken of myself on the roof at 4 a.m, arms smudged with tar, cheeks streaked with rain and sweat, smiling into the lens despite the ache. A small act, but it was mine. Unfiltered, unedited, undeniably present. A ping broke the silence. A message from Loretta, my old neighbor. You might want to come by. Something's happened. I had no home, no place, but I still had one last thread tying me to the past. Loretta's kitchen still smelled like cinnamon and pine sol. It hadn't changed in years. Same yellow curtains, same faded linoleum that curled near the fridge. She handed me a chipped mug with coffee that was stronger than kindness, but warmer than anything I'd felt in weeks. I almost didn't tell you, she said, wiping her hands on her apron like she always did when nervous. Didn't know if it was my place. I looked up from the steam curling over the mug. Tell me what? She sat down across from me, folded her hands. Last week, I ran into your mother in the bread aisle at the market basket. She was talking to that notary fellow, the one with the wandering eye. She didn't see me, but I heard her say, he doesn't need to know as long as the papers are clean. Then she said something about transferring the property. I didn't blink, didn't breathe, just nodded. Loretta leaned in. Delphine, I'm sorry, but it sounded like something that ain't right. I didn't say anything, just finished my coffee, thanked her, and left. That afternoon, I drove past the house, not with the intention to confront, but to retrieve what I'd left behind. I parked across the street, watched the front window. A shadow moved. The blinds twitched. I took a breath and walked up to the door. Orenthal opened it. His eyes narrowed like he had hoped I wouldn't show. Pamela's out running errands, he said, stepping just far enough to block the doorway. I offered a pleasant smile. I just need to grab a few old documents. I won't be long. He didn't like it, but he stepped aside. I walked in like I belonged there, which, legally, I still might have. The kitchen was the same, tidy, clinical. It always had this sterile feel, like no one cooked in it, only staged their lives around it. I moved to the cookbook shelf, slowly, like I was browsing for Grandma's meatloaf recipe. Behind the row of dusty binders and index cards, something white peeked out. An envelope. Unmarked except for 2 words scribbled in blue ink. Transfer agreement. I slid it free, heart pounding, but fingers steady. I unfolded the pages on the kitchen counter, smoothed them flat. The title leaped out, Quitclaim Deed. And there it was. My name, next to Orenthal's. Only the signature next to mine wasn't mine. I stared at it. The loops were too neat. The D curled too high. It looked like someone trying too hard to forge something they never understood. The date? 2 weeks before the night they threw me out. I took a photo with my phone. Just one. Then carefully refolded the papers and slid them back where I'd found them. No confrontation. Not yet. That night, I sat in my truck with my old phone, the one still logged into our joint bank account. I tapped the icon. It spun for a moment, then asked for login credentials. Invalid. I tried again, locked out. I called the bank. After 10 minutes of waiting and a barrage of security questions, the representative's voice finally came on. Looks like the account holder removed your access on the 10th. I'm sorry, Ms. Beaumont, but your name is no longer associated with this account. The 10th. That was the day before Pamela texted me about the roof. I hung up. They didn't just kick me out. They'd scrubbed me clean from the financial picture. Quietly, permanently, I sat in silence, the dashboard clock blinking past midnight. Then I turned on the overhead light and started listing everything I knew. Dates, details, documents. This wasn't about begging for a place back at the table. This was about proving who that table really belonged to. I wasn't out for revenge. Not yet. I was out for truth. Back at the cafe the next morning, I opened my email and created a new folder titled Start Here. I uploaded the photo of the forged signature and attached it to a blank message addressed to myself. Subject line, Start Here. I hit send. Then I whispered to the screen, "They think this ends with a signature. They have no idea who I am." The next morning, I made my first call. To someone who used to help people like me fight back. The text came in just after noon on a Tuesday. Dinner this Friday, family only. No hello, no signature, just that. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the tone was unmistakable. Pamela had switched phones again. Her way of shedding the past, pixel by pixel. I stared at it for a long while. The phrasing stuck with me. Family only. That was the knife twist, not the invitation. For a second, I thought of deleting it and pretending it never arrived. But curiosity has teeth, and mine had been gnawing at the silence too long. I needed to see what they'd look like when they saw me walk through the door, whether they'd flinch or smile. By the time Friday came, I had rehearsed a dozen versions of the evening in my mind, none of which included arriving to find 5 chairs around the dining table when 6 were clearly expected. I stepped into the house unannounced. No one greeted me. No one turned to say they were glad I came. It felt like I'd wandered into a staged photograph, not a family gathering. Orenthal sat at the head of the table, dressed like he'd just walked out of a menswear catalog. Pamela floated between the kitchen and the table, placing dishes as if this was her kingdom, and we were merely subjects. My name wasn't on any of the place cards, but Orenthal's was, centered in bold script, just above where Mom had placed the roast. We ate in near silence for the first few minutes. Forks clinked, glasses refilled. A few safe comments about the weather floated around. I didn't touch my plate. Then, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat no one asked for, Pamela lifted her glass and said, "I want to make a toast." Every head turned. "I just want to say how proud I am," she began, her gaze locking onto Orenthal. "For stepping up, for being the man this house needed." She didn't look at me. Not until the next line. "Not everyone's built for responsibility. Some people crumble when it gets too heavy." A soft chuckle bubbled from one of the cousins. I didn't even register who. I stood, napkin still folded in my lap. "Did you call me here to eat silence?" My voice cut the air cleanly. Everyone froze. Pamela blinked once, slowly. Orenthal smirked, but said nothing. I looked around the room, let the moment settle. No apology came, no explanation. Just eyes that wouldn't meet mine. I didn't bother staying for dessert. In the parking lot, I sat in my truck and opened Facebook, needing something mindless to distract me. That's when Joanna's message came through. "Hey, is this your old desk?" She sent a link. Pam's Clean Out Finds was the page name. A photo of my childhood desk sat under the caption, "Fresh start, clearing space for growth, great condition, no holds." My bookshelf was listed below it. Same one I built with Grandpa back in high school. The carvings we made into the side, ours and Grandma's initials, had been painted over in white. They told me those things were in storage. They were selling my past for $40 apiece. My fingers curled around the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles turned pale. But I didn't cry. The next morning, I stopped by the Goodwill downtown. It smelled like dust and old carpet, but I wasn't looking for comfort. I walked the aisles until I found it. A chipped mug with a faded pink rim. "Best daughter ever," it read. I'd made it in 5th grade art class and given it to Pamela on Mother's Day. She kept it on her windowsill for years. Now it was priced at 99 cents. I bought it. Back in the truck, I placed the mug beside me, snapped a photo of it with the marketplace listings, and filed them under a new folder on my phone labeled Proof. Every piece they tossed, I whispered, will be another nail in their credibility. I was halfway through organizing screenshots when a ping interrupted me. An email had landed in my inbox, my old account, the one I thought they'd stopped using. It was from Orenthal, or rather meant for someone else, a real estate agent. I'd been mistakenly CC'd. Subject: transfer finalized, she's out. No greeting, no context, just confirmation. I didn't know if they thought I was stupid or broken, but I was neither. I was just done waiting. I was sitting in the public library, tucked in the back corner where the outlet actually worked and the Wi-Fi wasn't spotty. My laptop was open, half a dozen tabs up. Screenshots of the fake deed, copies of emails, notes I'd written to myself in the margins of scanned PDFs. I was building something, quietly, steadily. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from Wyatt, one of the warehouse guys I used to swap shifts with. "Your brothers live again. You might want to see this." My stomach dropped before I even clicked the link. The stream was already a few minutes in. Orenthal's face filled the frame, all confidence and faux humility, sitting in what was unmistakably his dining room. Behind him, the wall clock ticked loudly, and that cursed oil painting of a rooster hung crooked, same as always. "We had to make some tough calls, yeah," he was saying, between sips of something expensive. "But you can't carry dead weight forever. Eventually, you gotta cut it off before it sinks the whole ship." Comments streamed in, laughing emojis, clapping hands. One asked, "Is she watching this?" He smirked, glanced at the camera like he knew the answer. "She left. Well, eventually." In the background, Pamela appeared, passing through with a casserole dish, smiling like this was just another Sunday. My mouth went dry. They were broadcasting this like it was a show, like I had been a plotline, a complication they'd heroically overcome. A ping alerted me that the stream was being clipped, shared. They were turning my life into a punchline. No context, no voice. Just their version, polished and public. They made me the villain to justify the theft. I muttered to myself, hands clenched around the phone. I closed the laptop. I couldn't sit there anymore. It was late afternoon when I pulled up in front of the house. The light had shifted, shadows stretching across the yard. My heart beat evenly, not with panic, but with purpose. I rang the doorbell once, then again. Finally, Orenthal opened the door. He didn't even pretend to be surprised. "You're not welcome here." "I just need something from my room," I said calmly. "Legal documents, from before." He didn't budge. "I'm documenting this for protection," he added, pulling out his phone. "Don't flatter yourself," I said. Then he stepped outside and called the cops. "She's trying to break into our home," he said, loud enough for the neighbors watering their azaleas to hear. When the officers arrived, I was already standing at the edge of the lawn, hands visible, demeanor steady. They asked for my name, my relationship to the property. I answered each question without flinching. The taller officer glanced at his notepad. "Technically, the title's shifted. If the current resident doesn't give permission, we can't let you in." "That house was mine before it was his stage," I said, voice sharp as glass. They handed me a printed trespass warning. I accepted it with a nod. As I walked back to my truck, my steps didn't falter. My face didn't change. But something inside me crystallized. Later, I sat in a booth at Betty's Diner off Maple Street, the kind of place where coffee gets poured without asking, and the waitress knows everyone's kids' names. I spread everything across the table, my evidence, my timeline, my next steps. An older man at the next booth eyed my files. "You fighting family?" he asked. I didn't answer directly. He nodded anyway. "You need someone who knows how to handle folks who smile while stabbing. Look up Frank Alder, downtown. He's been through fire." I took out a pen, wrote the name down. They'd taken my house. Now I'd take back the truth. Back at the motel, I snapped a photo of the trespass warning with my ID beside it. attached it to an email with the subject, Fraudulent Property Transfer, Request for Legal Counsel. I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment, then hit send. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about accountability, and I had just begun. The law office smelled like old books and fresh ink. Clean, deliberate. Frank Alder didn't waste time with small talk. He had already reviewed everything I emailed. The forged deed, the live stream clip, the trespass notice. "We can build a case," he said, his voice steady but not cold. "But you need to be stone. No outbursts. No pity plays. You let the facts speak, and we frame them right." I nodded once. "Stone's all I've got left." We shook hands, his grip firm but brief. As I walked out of his office and back onto the busy street, the world felt quieter. Not calmer, just paused. Like everyone around me was on some track I no longer belonged to. That illusion broke when I got back to my motel and found a letter shoved under the door. A pale blue envelope, my name, handwritten. I opened it, expecting some last-ditch plea. It was a utility bill, final notice, overdue. The address? My former home. The one they kicked me out of. The account name? Mine. I called the number listed on the bottom, my voice calm only because I'd practiced being hollow. "Hi, I received this notice, but I haven't lived at that address in over a month." The woman on the other end asked for account verification, then politely said, "Ma'am, you're the primary account holder. You're responsible." I stared at the ceiling. "Pamela said she'd moved it to her name." "Well, it appears your name was never removed. We've been billing the registered account holder." "Which is me." "Yes, ma'am." I didn't argue. I just hung up. They'd erased me from the dinner table, the group chat, the walls, but left my name on the bills. I folded the letter, placed it into the file I now carried with me everywhere, and drove straight to the house. I didn't knock this time. Pamela opened the door, her face unreadable. Behind her, Orenthal leaned against the banister, that same smirk from the livestream still glued to his mouth. "I'm not here to argue," I said, handing her an envelope. "Just delivering this. A formal request to remove my name from all accounts, property records, everything." She took it without looking. "We already removed you from the family. That was enough." "You can't remove me from what I built," I replied, steady. "You built what, exactly?" Orenthal chimed in, eyes gleaming. "You patched a roof. Big deal." I didn't look at him. I looked at her. "I want this done legally, or I will take it further." Pamela didn't blink. "You'll do what you do. Just remember, you don't come from strength. You were always sensitive." I turned to leave. And that's when it came. "I gave birth to you," she said softly, almost as if to herself. "But I don't choose to keep you anymore." Orenthal chuckled. "Finally, she says it." I froze, just for a moment. Then I pulled my phone from my pocket, thumbed the record button, and said clearly, "Thank you." I didn't look back. Back at the motel, I wrote in my journal, "She didn't cut me off today. She freed me to cut them off." Later that night, Frank called. "Court date's set, 3 weeks from now." I let the silence linger before answering. Let's play their game, but on my terms. Then I opened my laptop, composed a formal cease and desist notice, addressed to Pamela. BCC'd a contact I'd found earlier that day, Scranton Legal Watchdog, a local newsletter that specialized in family disputes and shady estate transfers. I clicked send. The next time they'd see me, it wouldn't be at the front door. It would be across a courtroom aisle. The Scranton County Courthouse was smaller than I remembered, tucked between the post office and a bail bondsman's office that still had a blinking neon sign in the window. It was just before 9 a.m. when I stepped through the metal detector. Frank Alder beside me, his leather briefcase worn at the corners like a well-used weapon. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with the low murmur of observers. Small-town trials always drew eyes, especially when it involved old money and fresh betrayal. Pamela sat at the petitioner's table, calm as ever in a navy blazer too stiff for her personality. Orenthal beside her wore that smug, full-mouth smile that made you want to scrub the air around him. I didn't acknowledge either of them. I held only one thing, an old photograph of me and my grandmother Marcelle, her arm around my shoulder, both of us laughing in front of the porch she built with her husband's hands. Tucked behind the frame was the will. Frank whispered, "No emotion today, just facts." I nodded. The first witness called was Loretta. She walked with her cane like it was an extension of her spine, upright and sure. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat before speaking. "Marcel told me many times that house was for Delphine. Said it plain as day. That girl stays. That girl gives. She's the one who never asks for nothing." The judge leaned forward. Pamela's lawyer, a man whose tie had more confidence than his argument, rose for cross-examination. "You're saying this was a verbal agreement?" he asked, as if her age made her memory unreliable. "I'm saying," Loretta replied without blinking, "that when a woman like Marcelle says something more than once and lives like it's true, it matters more than any notarized paper your client claims to have." Frank didn't object. He didn't need to. When she stepped down, Frank approached the bench and opened a slim envelope. "Your Honor," he said, "we present the handwritten will of Marcel Delaney. Dated. Signed. Witnessed." He laid it flat on the podium. The judge adjusted his glasses. I watched Orenthal pale. Pamela's fingers twitched under the table, one tapping against her thigh. Frank read aloud, "To my granddaughter Delphine, for her steadiness and care, I leave my home, so she may always have a place that is hers." A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. Pamela's lawyer moved to object, citing authenticity concerns. The judge raised a hand. "We'll have it examined by court-appointed verification, but the signature appears consistent." Then Frank looked at me. A small nod. I stood. "They didn't just take a house," I began, my voice even. "They tried to erase the years I gave. They scrubbed me from photos, family records, legal rights. They painted over my presence and called it a renovation." I held up a laminated photo, the one of me on the roof at 4 a.m., rain-soaked, tool belt slung around my waist, half smiling through exhaustion. The judge reached for it, turned it over. On the back, I had written one line: "A daughter who climbed in the rain so her family didn't get wet." No one spoke. Not even Orenthal. The judge closed the file. "We'll recess for review. The court will issue a preliminary ruling tomorrow morning." As we stepped outside, Pamela avoided my eyes. Orenthal stormed out without a word, his gait stiffer than usual. He wasn't used to being on the wrong side of a headline. I sat on the courthouse steps, letting the sun land on my face. I didn't smile, I just breathed. "If they were still human," I said quietly, "they'd feel shame. But maybe shame is too noble for some." Frank sat beside me, his briefcase between us, like a silent witness. "We just cracked their spine," he said, adjusting his coat. "Tomorrow, we rip the binding apart." And for once, they'd have to sit and watch while I spoke. And the world listened. The blinds in my motel room let in that sharp, colorless morning light that made everything look worse than it was. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, listening to the buzz of the fridge and the drip of a leaky faucet. My phone hadn't vibrated all night. No calls, no texts, no apologies. But I had 8 notifications from reporters. I got up, pulled on the same jeans I'd worn for 3 days, tied my hair back, and looked in the mirror above the sink. My eyes looked like they belonged to someone who had walked through a war and wasn't sure if the battle was over or just changing terrain. Today, the judge was supposed to deliver the ruling. I didn't expect celebration. Just an end. On the drive to the courthouse, I stopped at a red light and opened a message from Joanna. It was a TikTok link. I almost ignored it. My nerves didn't need another hit. But I tapped anyway. There it was. Orenthal's livestream, chopped and remixed. Subtitles across the screen read, "Dead weight saves roof." Someone had turned his smug comments into a trending meme. One clip zoomed in on his face as he said, "We had to cut her loose," then cut to a picture of a woman on a roof in the rain, duct tape in hand, with the caption, "Cut this!" The comments were brutal. Imagine kicking out the only one who actually kept your roof from collapsing. This man built nothing but his ego. Even the local station had picked it up, running a short segment titled, "Estate Disputes Go Viral. Who Really Owned the Home?" My phone buzzed again. Someone had tagged me in a comment. I ignored it. Outside the courthouse, I stepped out of the car, straightened my coat, and walked toward the doors. That's when a woman I didn't recognize approached me. Mid-50s, holding a reusable grocery bag. "Excuse me," she said with a smile. "Aren't you the housemaid from that video?" I blinked. For a second, I couldn't even form a response. "I used to be the owner," I said. "Or maybe I still am?" She nodded politely, oblivious, and walked on. That's how the world framed me, reduced to a background role in a story I built from the foundation up. Inside the courtroom, the tension was subdued. The air was cooler. Frank sat beside me, flipping through notes with the same methodical calm he always carried. The judge entered, and we rose. She didn't waste time. This court acknowledges the submitted will of Marcel Delaney as verified and legally binding. As such, we grant Ms. Delphine Beaumont temporary custodial rights of the property pending final estate distribution. Orenthal shifted in his seat. Mr. Orenthal Beaumont and Mrs. Pamela Beaumont are hereby ordered to vacate the property within 72 hours. Pamela didn't react. Her eyes never met mine. Orenthal clenched his jaw, nostrils flaring, but didn't speak. No apology, no retraction, just court orders and a quiet shuffle of papers. Frank leaned over. "You got your house," he said softly. "You just didn't get your family." I nodded. "I never had them, not really." Afterward, I returned to the house, not as a guest, not as a trespasser, but as the legal occupant. I brought a locksmith with me, and within minutes, the locks were changed. The door clicked shut with a satisfying finality. The inside smelled different, cheap cologne and synthetic candles. Every trace of my childhood had been wiped. No framed photos, no hand-sewn curtains from Marcel. But when I walked into the garage, I saw it. My old red toolbox, dusty but untouched, sitting on the shelf where I left it. They'd taken everything they could brag about, left the things that held real value. I sat on the porch for a while, staring at the cracked pavement, the flower bed overgrown with weeds, a house full of echoes. Later that night, I opened the file folder, Marcel's will, the court order, and the new deed. My name sat at the bottom. I ran my fingers across the print, then whispered, "Time to add one more line, one they can't erase. Not everyone who breaks you deserves to be remembered. Some just deserve to be forgotten." I walked into my old bedroom, half expecting it to smell the same. But it didn't. They'd painted the walls, some muted beige that had none of the warmth I remembered. The bed was gone. The bookshelf had been replaced by a trendy dresser that didn't fit the house. But the closet door still creaked the same way when I opened it. I reached for the top shelf, brushing aside a pile of plastic hangers and what looked like a broken Bluetooth speaker. Tucked behind an old shoebox was something else, smaller, heavier. I pulled down the box. The lid fell open with a quiet puff of dust. Inside were things I hadn't seen in years. Letters I wrote and never mailed, notes from teachers, a dried flower from prom tucked into a folded napkin. And then there it was. The locket. Gold-plated. Oval. Worn but intact. Marcel gave it to me the day I got accepted into community college. She had held it in her palm, like it weighed something holy. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "Now it's yours. Keep it close." I sat on the floor with the box in my lap and unfolded a wrinkled piece of notebook paper. Lined, smudged. My handwriting, age 16. It was a letter I had written to Marcel during one of those nights teenage girls think will destroy them. "I know I'm not like Orenthal," it began. "He's shiny. He always says the right thing. But I'm the one who stays up. I'm the one who keeps the lights on when the storms come. Why doesn't anyone see that? I read the whole thing aloud, my voice catching only once. I just want someone to see me before I disappear. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. That girl had cried enough. I folded the letter back into the box and stood up. As I passed the hallway, I saw Pamela's door was slightly ajar. On her dresser, resting like a trophy, was the locket. My locket. Except she'd turned it into a keychain, stripped the chain, attached it to a leather tag that read, Legacy. Legacy. Weeks ago, I had seen a photo on her Instagram. A family heirloom passed down for strength. Hundreds of likes, comment after comment saying how classy she was. I took it back, without hesitation, without guilt. Back in the living room, I gathered 3 things: the letter, the locket, and the old red toolbox from the garage. I didn't touch the dishes, or the couches, or the shelves full of decor meant for show. I wasn't here to collect what was theirs. I was here to reclaim what was mine. I came here to recover me, I said to no one. Not them. That night, I sat on the floor of the room I used to sleep in, now stripped to bare wooden walls. I opened my phone and pressed record. I didn't plan the words. You erased me from your dinners, your holiday cards, your stories. But I'm still here, still standing, still remembering. I stared into the camera, no filter, no makeup, no facade. And unlike you, I never needed an audience to be real. I saved the recording, not to post, not to share, just to keep. A timestamp on a moment where silence stopped being strength and became survival. A few minutes later, my phone rang. Frank. His voice was steady. The estate hearing is finalized. It's yours. Officially. Completely. I held the locket in my hand, pressed it to my chest, and nodded. But before I closed the door on them forever, there was one more name I needed to erase. Legally. The attic was the last place I hadn't opened. Every other room had been combed through, sorted, or sealed shut. But the attic, Marcel's attic, still held the same air it always had. Dry dust, cedar, old linen. A place where time had folded itself and waited for someone to notice. I pulled down the ladder and climbed slowly, each step groaning like it remembered more than I did. The light bulb flickered to life, casting a soft yellow across boxes, bags, and a single trunk with Marcel's initials etched into the leather. Next to it sat a plastic crate marked with Orenthal's name. I knew it before I even saw the labels. Orenthal, piano recital. Pam's 40th, VHS tapes stacked and labeled with care. I flipped through them, one after another. Not a single one had my name. But tucked in the back, half covered by a folded blanket, was a lone tape. Thanksgiving, 2004. I slid it into the dusty VCR and hit play. The screen buzzed. A shaky shot of the kitchen appeared. Marcel stirring sweet potatoes, Orenthal fiddling with the TV remote. Off camera, my voice. Can I try now? No answer. Just silence. Then static. I ejected the tape and sat there a while, the old blanket across my lap. Later that morning, I stepped outside to check the mailbox. Bills, junk, and a small envelope, handwritten. It was from Mrs. Dunley, our neighbor. Inside, a note. Thought you should know. I remember your father saying once, that girl's not like the rest of us. He said it like a compliment, but sometimes I wasn't so sure. I stared at the paper, reading that line over and over. She's not like anyone else. I'd heard it as a kid. From teachers, family friends, strangers at church. It always hung in the air like perfume. Pleasant at first, but overbearing the longer it lingered. I never knew if it was pride or warning. I pocketed the note and walked the perimeter of the house. Gutters sagged, paint peeled. The lawn was patchy and bare in places. It was clear no one had cared for it, only claimed it. I called a contractor. I need a wall taken down, I said. The one between the front sitting room and the den. The man paused. You remodeling? No, I'm removing a boundary. By noon, I sat with Frank in his office, My legal letter sat on the desk between us. I had signed it that morning. It read, "I decline any further inheritance. I relinquish all emergency contact roles. I request no contact from any party named herein. Permanently." Frank looked it over, then at me. "This isn't common." "Neither is being disowned by a smile," I said. He slid the letter into a folder and said nothing more. That evening, I returned home and pulled open a drawer in the sideboard. Tucked inside was a letter I'd written to my father after my high school graduation. One I never sent. "Dear Dad," it began, "you clapped louder for Orenthal than you ever did for me, and still, I hoped one day you'd see me for more than who I wasn't." I read it once, folded it neatly, then walked to the fireplace. The flames danced quietly. I dropped the letter in. It curled, blackened, and disappeared. Not everything needs an answer. Some things just need to burn. I turned off the lights, locked the front door, and stood in the darkened foyer, ready to sleep in a house that was finally mine. In silence I chose. Just as I turned the lock, a knock echoed through the wood. I hesitated, hand still on the deadbolt. I looked through the peephole. It was Loretta. She said nothing. She simply held up a small cloth bundle in her arms. Some people return not to reopen the wound, but to offer the bandage you never expected. Loretta didn't say a word when I opened the door. She stood there in her Sunday shoes, holding a small velvet bundle wrapped carefully like it might break if anyone breathed wrong. I stepped aside, and she walked in without waiting for an invitation. That's how it was between us now. No pretense, just understanding. She placed the bundle in my hands. "They threw it out with a bunch of frames," she said, eyes scanning the room like she was checking for ghosts. "But I thought, maybe you'd want it." I unwrapped the cloth. It was the photo. Me and Marcel on the front porch, both of us sun-kissed and wind-blown from that long weekend we spent repainting the swing. The frame was cracked, the photo itself smudged at the corner. But I remembered the day clear as breath. I didn't cry. I didn't thank her out loud. I just nodded, wiped the glass with my sleeve, and set it gently on the table. The next morning, I dressed in quiet determination. Slacks, blouse, no makeup. My truck had been freshly serviced, not because it needed to be, but because I needed something in my life to feel dependable again. At the county clerk's office, I filled out the paperwork with deliberate care. The woman behind the counter squinted at the form. "You're changing your last name back to Delaney?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Reason?" "They gave it to me to erase me," I replied. "I give it back to rewrite myself." She didn't ask again. That afternoon, I returned home with paint, a hammer, and a single brass nail. I repainted the wall in the living room, not the whole room, just one patch. The same shade of green Marcel used to say reminded her of Appalachia summers. When the paint dried, I rehung the photo. Dead center. It didn't straighten the room. It didn't fix the broken corners of what had been done. But it recentered something in me. "This house forgot me," I whispered, pressing the nail tighter into the wall. But I never forgot who made it home. Weeks passed. One afternoon, the mailman dropped a package and a stack of envelopes at my door. The return address, Orenthal and Pamela, legal documents, apologies, requests for reconciliation. I placed them in a fire-safe box, locked it, filed it under, unopened. "They're not mine to read," I said aloud. "Not anymore." These days, I split my time between volunteering at the shelter and patching roofs with Habitat for Humanity. My hands are never idle. I've come to see that fixing broken things isn't a punishment. It's a kind of grace. Turns out, the real curse isn't mending. It's trying to repair people who take pride in remaining shattered. One evening, I received a notification from the clerk's office. The deed had been officially updated. The house now legally bore my new name, my old name. I printed it out, sat down at the dining table, and signed. Then I paused. Beneath the signature line, in small, neat cursive, I wrote, "In memory of Marcel, who gave me a roof before I knew I needed one." This wasn't revenge. This was restoration.